Welcome to Brash Words, where we say it like we mean it. The only podcast where you hear the truth about business. It's for entrepreneurs who are willing to learn and grow by intently listening to raw and entertaining content that explores and pushes through the fears of running a business. Now, if you're ready to hear the fucking truth about business, here's your host, Sly.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Season 2, Episode 1 of Brash Words. My God, it's been a tremendous long time since I've had the opportunity to record a podcast. You know, and by the way, there's a little bit of Children of Bodom playing in the background just to kind of get me in the mood to play some really, just listen to some killer music and just have the opportunity to chat with you guys. Like I was saying, it's been a crazy long time since I've actually sat down and recorded any content, wrote anything. You know, I got my blog launched in, I think it was summer 2020, SylvainPerrier.com. I've been busy with work, and I've been busy kind of, going through this pandemic, much like the rest of you have, in respect of running a business. Mercatus Technologies here in Canada, Mercatus USA in the US. And you'll probably notice that my setup is, in fact, entirely different. This is a meeting room next to my corporate office, which is right through the door, just on the side of me here. And we decided to convert this room, and it's still a meeting room, but we decided to convert this room into kind of like a mini podcast studio with a bunch of new equipment. So we have cameras kind of now all over the place. We installed these Mevo cameras that are owned by Logitech and so on, and we have our new mixer board. It's not really a new mixer board. It's the one I brought from home because we can't find our core mixer board that we had at the old office at 545 King Street West. Yeah, and by the way, we moved during the pandemic. We're now at 200 Wellington Street West I would say we're in the heart of the entertainment district, but we're kind of on the edge of it and closer to the financial district and quite frankly, much closer to the train station, which is pretty cool. So a big shout out to the folks at Mercatus Technologies for kind of allowing me to use this space to record Brash Words. So kind of at the tail end of 2019, I had a bunch of shows kind of planned out with a bunch of really cool guests. And we went into the holiday seasons, and then I was on the road from just before Christmas right through to, I would say, Friday, March 13th, 2020, with everything really kind of suddenly came to a complete screeching, halting stop. I went from, in December, I was in California. I came home, and then I went to Edmonton. I was in Edmonton for almost 3-4 nights, and then I came home, and then it was the holidays, and then straight into New York City for a trade show. And then I did the West Coast run, which I like to call it. So flying from Toronto to San Francisco, and then from San Francisco, drove all the way down into San Diego. And this is where really COVID started to pick up steam. I got on the plane, would have been end of February, I think Feb 26th. I had a mask on. I bought a mask online, had it delivered to my hotel room. And people were kind of freaking out. Why is this guy wearing a mask? My God, is he a terrorist? I'm not, clearly not a terrorist. And we landed, and you could tell it was getting significant in terms of the conversations in the media, conversations amongst the healthcare workers, and so on. And this was going to be a real thing. And we ended up, I'm having to go to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and then into Minneapolis. So I drove. This was mid-March. And suddenly I remember March 11th, President Trump addressed the nation. It was sheer panic. They started closing the international borders to certain countries. And there was quite the fear in terms of what may happen for Canadians that were in the United States that needed to come home. So I got in the car, left Minneapolis overnight, and I ended up staying in Madison, Wisconsin. And then I made it to the border on Friday the 13th. And that was it. And that was it for travel, for business. And it became a new climate in terms of how do you run a business remotely. We sent people home. We did a bunch of things. And unfortunately, the knock-on effect of kind of, being, and I say knock-on effect, but fundamentally being worried about the business is what occurs to kind of Brash Words. So I kind of put everything on hold in 2020. Figured by the end of 2020 that I'd have time to come back to it, in which I really didn't. But I will tell you, 2020 and part of 2021 was some significant growth for Mercatus, significant growth for me as an individual in terms of resiliency, in terms of human compassion, and how do you organize yourself? How do you execute remotely when you can't be physically with people, which is something that I really like. I really enjoy working, hand in hand with people in a sense of physical presence, because I feed off that energy, and it kind of gives me a sense of validation that I may be doing something positive, and if I'm doing something negative, obviously adjust. But spent a whole lot of time reading, adjusting, and 2021 came in. I'm like, all right, we're going to resume this podcast. We're going to do it remotely. It's going to be Zoom and stuff like that. And unfortunately, that really wasn't the case. It became a much deeper focus on advertising and sales, and working on the other podcast that I spent a lot of time on, which is a Digital Grocer, which we relaunched, we rebranded, which is really cool. And my co-host Mark Fairhurst for Digital Grocer normally sits in the chair right here next to me. We're going to be doing episodes next week. I think we're going to do an inaugural launch, talk about what's going to happen in 2022 and so on and so on. So for Brash Words, the format is not necessarily going to change. I don't see a need to have to do that. But what I will do is probably have less guests on in terms of sharing what do they do in their business and insights. I still will have guests, and I want to go, when the guests do come on, I'm going to want to go deeper with them in terms of, talk to me about a challenge that you had. Talk to me about an issue that you may have encountered in the last 2 years. What's been the impact of the pandemic? And I think the reality is, we are, as humans, as the human race, as a country, a city, a state, a province, wherever you may reside, as a family, as friends, we're learning to kind of navigate the waters around the pandemic, and it's going to change the way that we do things. It has already changed the way that I conduct business. It already has changed the fact that I went from a pretty expensive travel budget, flying around the country and on the continent and staying weeks on end outside of the city, interacting with clients and third parties. That has stopped, and now it's fundamentally I travel through Zoom. Which I'm not complaining with, which I think is fine. It's just a different way of interacting with people. So we're going to want to kind of go deep on these types of topics and subjects with people in terms of understanding what has been the cause and effect of the pandemic on their own lives and their own business. I am going to go back to the fundamentals with respect to certain things that are very key in terms of running a corporation. Something as simple, how do you conduct great meetings, which is something we had to all relearn how to do during the pandemic, right? We're all Zoom fatigued. And unfortunately, the lines have been blurred between our personal lives and our work lives. And how do you create a sense of balance with your people? And I've been reading copious amount of books, so I'm going to bring some of those to the table, some of the key learnings that I've come out of there. From reading. I'm going to want to bring some of those authors. One of the books I'm just wrapping up reading right now, it is The Power of Discipline by Danielle Walter, and it's right here. It's a pretty interesting book. It's a quick read. It's about 125 pages. I recently started reading a book it's called The Quick History on China. I just finished listening to Dax Shepard's podcast with Eric Schmidt, from the former CEO of Google. And he talks about China's long-term game and the metaverse and so on. So I'm like, okay, I'm a student of history. And I'm like, okay, I want to position my mind to be able to absorb what Eric has been talking about on Dax's podcast. So I said, okay, I better, kind of beef my knowledge up on the history of China so I can kind of catch up. So I'll be bringing some of those topics to the table. It's exciting. And I will tell you, at the tail end of season 1 from Brash Words, there was a couple of episodes I just couldn't post. They were, first of all, they were funny. They were hilarious. They were recorded in Las Vegas. Actually, one episode was recorded in Las Vegas. And then another episode was recorded in my hotel room in San Diego. Each of those episodes featured Mark Fairhurst and Frank Laudadio, both from Mercatus. Mark is our VP of Marketing, and Frank is our VP of Client Experience. And I just decided not to post those because they were, I wouldn't say they were crude, but they were quite funny. And they were just all over the map. But I will say, from traveling through the early part of 2020 into 2021, and I haven't done any trips for 2022. Everything's been kind of kiboshed because of Omicron. But I have, I stayed an enormous amount of time in California, and specifically when I'm in LA, I like to stay at the LAX Marriott, and right on the edge of Inglewood, and very, very close to the airport in any case. And I've amassed a tremendous amount of stories and tales from the road. From one story from on a Saturday, from listening to an individual claim he was a pilot for Lufthansa for the Airbus 380, and for me asking him questions, to the bartender Cade coming over and saying, "Hey, Sly's my nickname, say, last week this guy was a nurse," and I just bust out laughing. To having a combat pilot from Desert Storm who was retiring that weekend tell us that he had been deployed to shoot down some additional the plane that during 9/11, the plane that went down in Pennsylvania, that President Bush wouldn't issue the order. It just mind-boggling things like that. To seeing a convention of school teachers, and one of the school teachers completely passing out on the floor of the hotel with a bottle of wine in her hands. I mean, I'm telling you, the stories are just mind-blowing. And people, when we do get together, and let's all be honest, no one's really following the rules, but when we do get together, and people will say, well, what have you experienced on the road? And I tell these stories, and people look at me like, this isn't true, this is crazy. So it's going to be fun and exciting, and we'll see where it goes for season 2. And I haven't booked any guests yet, so my pledge to you guys that are going to be listening is I will be recording easily an episode a week. They're going to be under 30 minutes. I encourage you, if you have any questions, or if you think of a guest that really should be on this podcast, by all means. It doesn't matter what walk of life they're from, just reach out. It's sylvain.perrier@brashwords.com. Better yet, just go to my blog, which is sylvainperrier.com, and then you can just go, and there's a contact form, and you can just fill it out, and then the information will come to me. You can also follow me on LinkedIn, brashwords.com. You can also go on Instagram, brashwords. And in any case, I'm looking forward to do this. This is not about me. This is about you guys and me sharing content back out. And I think at some point, because we have all this gear, we're going to want to do some form of potentially a Facebook Live or something like that, where I can take real-time questions from the audience. Peace. Fuckers, I want you guys to tune in, and don't forget to like the podcast on any of the networks that you fucking listen to these podcasts. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Brash Words. If you liked hearing the truth about business, then follow us on Twitter and Instagram @Brash Words. And for more great content, visit our website, brashwords.com. Join us next time for more real, raw, honest truth about running your business.